Some acts of revenge do not explode all at once. They grow silently. For years, they continue living inside people, and when the time finally comes, they can destroy even an empire. That was exactly the case for Harpagus. At that banquet in the palace, he had not only lost his son, he had also lost his loyalty. From that moment on, he no longer served Astyages. He was only waiting, because sometimes the most dangerous people are the silent ones. From the outside, the Median Empire still looked powerful. Its armies were large, its cities were wealthy. But inside, cracks had already begun to form. Because great empires are usually not destroyed from the outside, they rot from within. The soldiers were exhausted, the nobles were restless. The people complained about heavy taxes, and most importantly, Astyages now ruled through fear. Fear creates power in the short term, but in the long run, it pushes people away from you. The Persians were still seen as a secondary people living beneath Median rule. But there was something no one had noticed. The Persians were beginning to unite, and at the center of that unity stood one name: Cyrus the Great. Cyrus was no longer a child. The years had changed him. His childhood in the mountains, the harsh life, and learning his true identity had transformed him into a different kind of leader. Because he came from the people, yet also carried royal blood. And when those two things combine, people no longer see a man merely as a ruler. They see him as hope. At night, Persian nobles began meeting in secret. Around small fires, quiet conversations took place, and at every gathering, the same question was asked: will the rule of the Medes last forever? Whenever Cyrus spoke, people listened carefully, because he did not speak like other leaders. He did not speak only about power. He spoke about freedom. And throughout history, few things unite people faster than a sense of hope. One day, a secret message reached Cyrus, the sender, Harpagus. The message was short but powerful. The time has come, because Harpagus had finally made his decision. The hatred he had carried for years was finally turning into action, and he was one of the most important men inside the Median army, which meant his support could change the fate of a war. Cyrus now faced a choice. Either he would remain silent or answer the call of history. And for some people, such moments are unavoidable because they were never born for an ordinary life. Cyrus rose to his feet, and he spoke to the Persian tribes. We were not born to live as slaves. Those words spread from the mountains to the plains, and for the first time, the Persians truly began feeling like one people. Soon after, Persian banners began to rise. This was no longer simple unrest, it was open rebellion. When Astyages heard the news, he was furious, because the child he had once tried to kill was now marching against him with an army. And perhaps worst of all, the prophecy was beginning to come true. The first battles were small, border skirmishes, sudden raids. But quickly, the rebellion grew larger. Cyrus's army was smaller in number. They had fewer weapons, fewer resources, but they possessed something else: belief. Because sometimes, what makes an army powerful is not its numbers. It is what they are fighting for. Astyages still remained confident, because he had not been defeated for years. And like many powerful rulers, he made his greatest mistake. He underestimated his enemy. In his eyes, Cyrus was still only a child. But what he failed to realize was this: some people become most dangerous at the exact moment they are underestimated. At last, the moment arrived that would change the course of the war. Many commanders within the Median army had secretly made contact with Harpagus, and when the battle began, some deliberately retreated, some refused to fight, and others directly joined Cyrus's side. Suddenly, Astyages' army began to collapse because the empire that looked powerful from the outside had already broken apart within. In the final great battle, two men stood against one another. On one side, the old king who had ruled through fear for years, Astyages. On the other side, the young leader born from prophecy, Cyrus the Great. This was not merely a war. It was the collision of the past and the future, and history was about to make its choice. Morning came. As the sun slowly rose, the two armies stared at each other. On one side of the dusty plain, the Median army, on the other, the Persians. The silence felt heavy, because before battle begins, people usually think the same thing. Will I still be alive by tonight? Soldiers gripped their spears tightly, horses moved nervously. Even the wind itself seemed to slow down. And in that moment, history held its breath. Astyages stood before his army. He had seen years of war, won countless victories. But today, there was a different feeling inside him, because the enemy before him was not merely a rebel, it was his own blood. And perhaps because of that, for the first time in his life, he was truly afraid. But his pride would not allow him to admit that fear, because for some rulers, losing the throne is worse than death itself. On the opposite side stood Cyrus the Great. The world still did not fully know his name, but his soldiers were ready to die for him, because what Cyrus inspired in people was not fear, it was trust. And people may fight for leaders they fear, but for leaders they trust, they give their lives. Cyrus looked at his army. The Persians were tired, outnumbered, but there was something in their eyes. Belief. Then, the battle began. The sound of the first collision echoed across the entire plain. Shields crashed together, spears shattered, horses screamed, and suddenly, everything turned into chaos. But even in the middle of battle, some people stand out from the rest. Cyrus was exactly that kind of man, because he did not merely give orders, he fought at the front, and that changed the spirit of his soldiers. Right in the middle of the battle, something unexpected happened. Some units of the Median armies began retreating. Some stopped fighting entirely, and others directly joined the Persian side, because the hatred that had remained silent for years had finally surfaced. Harpagus had made his move, and in that moment, Astyages realized something. He had not only lost the war, he had lost his own people. Sometimes, an empire falls slowly, but sometimes it shatters in a single day. As the Median army began collapsing, panic spread everywhere. Soldiers fled, commanders ignored orders, and the power that had seemed invincible for years suddenly looked fragile, because people could now feel it. The future no longer belonged to the Medes. As the battle neared its end, the two men finally looked at each other. On one side, the king of the past. On the other, the king of the future. And this moment was not only political, it was personal. Because the child once marked for death was now destroying his grandfather's empire. Sometimes history forces people to live through the very thing they fear most. And Astyages was experiencing exactly that. At last, Astyages was defeated, removed from the throne. And so, the Median Empire, which had ruled the East for years, collapsed before the Persians. But the interesting thing was this: Cyrus did not have his grandfather executed, because he was different from many rulers. His strength was not only in war, it was in his self-control. After the victory, Persian soldiers gathered around Cyrus, and in that moment, a new era began. The Persians were no longer a people living in the shadows. They were becoming an empire, and this would change the world. Because Cyrus the Great did not merely want to become a king, he wanted to change the boundaries of the world itself. Because in the East, powerful kingdoms still remained. Kingdom of Lydia, Neo-Babylonian Empire, and many more had not yet faced him. But now everyone was saying the same thing: a new king is rising among the Persians, and soon that name would spread across the entire world. Cyrus.